January 18th, 2022. We'll go ahead and call this special board meeting of the Carson City School Board Trustees to order. First on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Okay, second by Laurel. Any public comment on the agenda? Seeing none. Any online?
No, Mr. Varner.
We'll call for a motion. I think we already did. We'll call for a vote, I'm sorry. On the agenda.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
Any opposition? Seeing none, the agenda item carries. We're now moving to the flag salute. Trustee Cassiopo will lead us. Allegiance to the flag of the United States
Of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we move into the agenda items, just want to let everybody know that Trustee Carini is joining us via telephone. And then we also have Dr. Deb Oliver from NASB, who led our superintendent search to date. She's also unable to appear here in person tonight, and she's joining us by telephone also. The first agenda item, it would be discussion and possible action to establish the criteria and process in hiring a superintendent for the Carson City School District, which may include, without limitation, number one, select the applicants vetted by the Nevada Association of School Boards to be interviewed by the CCSD Board of Trustees. Number two, establish and finalize the interview questions. And three, determine the date, time, location, and format for interviewing the candidates. And this is for possible action. At this time, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Oliver, who's on the telephone. She's going to lead us through the discussion. Dr. Oliver, you can still hear us, right?
I can. I want to make sure you don't have feedback.
No, it sounds good.
Okay, good. I apologize. I'm not able to be there with you all this evening, but we'll get through this discussion, create our questions, and look at the candidates, as we move forward in the process. Thank you, President Varner, for the introduction, and trustees. I'm glad we're here together. As we're moving forward in the process, you all had received the packet of information. Well, you've had the outline of the process itself, as well as then receiving the candidates, where there were 10 candidates submitted to you. For this process this evening, I thought it would be great to start with developing the questions to really gain an understanding of the kind of questions that you want to ask, and then we would move at looking at the candidate pool for you to decide on who your top 4 candidates would be. And that is a little bit of a switch with the dates in the calendar because of availability of when interviews would be able to happen. So if that sounds like an okay order of events, we'll get going.
Go ahead, Laurel.
Mr. Russell, that is out of order from the numbered system in our agenda item. Is that acceptable to make that switch?
Yeah, completely in the discretion of the president. You have a flexible agenda, so if you want to take the items, the sub-items in item 3 in a different order, that's fine.
Dr. Oliver, if that works best for you, I'm okay with it. So please proceed.
Okay, thank you. If that works for all of you, we're good to go. First of all, you've had an opportunity to view the rubric that we're looking at for the candidates. If you would, I was actually hoping I would be able to share my screen and have that on screen for you. But that was in the packet of information that you've had and are there. Do you have that with you?
Just to confirm, Dr. Oliver, is that the group of papers entitled Superintendent Interview Scoring Rubric Specific Indicators for Candidate? And it has
Yes, thank you. That is
boxes on it?
Yes. And now I'm getting there and make sure we all have that same. Looking at the questions, we had Mr. Cassiopo and President Varner submitted some questions that they had thought of to be able to present this evening and talk about. And the process, how I thought we would go about this is looking at each one of the specific indicators, looking at the sample questions or questions that you think might fit or that you would like to ask for that particular criteria. Thinking that we would then come up with a list of up to 15 to 20 questions. And well, I guess there's two scenarios, and that is something, President Varner, that you might want to discuss on how we're looking at whether we want to come up with the specific questions that are going to be asked in the interviews, or if we'll come up with a group of approved questions to be asked, and the superintendent's search team from NASB could then take those questions and choose which of the questions would be asked during the interviews.
Yeah, I think you kind of explained it, but there's been two different scenarios discussed. One is to pick the questions that we're going to ask the candidates tonight, and the other would be to select a group of questions, more than what we plan to ask the candidate, submit those questions to NASB, and then they would assign them back out to the trustees to ask on a random basis. In other words, we may come up with 20, 25 questions, but maybe they would only ask 15 to the candidates. So it's kind of up to the board. Is there any discussion what your preferences are?
So is NASB asking the questions of the candidates that we interview? Because you said they.
No.
Oh, okay.
They would submit them to us to ask, and they would assign them to the different trustees, and then we'd go down the line, ask the questions. And each trustee would have a group of questions to ask. I don't know how many at this time. Go ahead, Joe.
Rich, I'm thinking we got to start in the same place. So my thought is, let's go through questions we think we want to include and maybe see where it gets us. If we've got a whole bunch of questions and we want a pool of them, I'm good either way. In the end, we're going to have to figure out what questions we're asking anyway. So I kind of think we can just get started and see where it goes.
Mike, you have anything?
Well, I think that one of the things about having a pool of questions and then having them selected, the candidates aren't necessarily going to have canned answers for every question we have,
Yeah.
which I think is a benefit.
Stacy?
Same.
Lupe?
I apologize that I am a few minutes late, so I don't think I caught on to everything. Can you please repeat the question?
Yes, what we're discussing is whether we should just select the questions tonight and only the questions that we're going to provide to the candidates to answer, or to get a pool of questions and then only provide a select amount of those questions to the candidate prior to the interview.
I would say select the questions that we're going to ask the candidates.
Okay. Dawn? Dawn, can you hear us?
I can hear you. It takes a couple minutes to mute here. or a couple seconds of mute.
Did you hear the question?
I did. I'm fine with that.
Which way?
We're going to decide on the questions, correct?
Yeah, but should we just choose the questions we're going to provide in advance or select a pool of questions and have them randomly given to the candidates?
I'll go either way.
Okay. It seems to me that the consensus is, go ahead, Laurel.
I prefer a pool of questions. We can approve the questions within that pool, but I prefer that because I'd like to see, part of a superintendent's responsibilities is to think on their feet, and I'd like to see if that is how that's demonstrated in the interview process.
Okay. Ryan, can we disagree on that, or do we need a motion?
I think you're going to take one motion on the entire item. When you're done, you can take separate motions. But I think the best way to do it is one motion at the end. You are going to need a motion on the entire item number 3, which will include the 3 subparts. So
Okay, thank you.
You can note what the motion might be right now, but I think the best way to handle it logistically is one motion at the end.
Okay, thank you. All right, Deb, I think the consensus is to do a poll of questions.
Great. And thank you for the clarification there and how you'd like to handle that. We will get to the end, and if you decide, hey, we've got some, we can go with that. So taking a look at the superintendent interview scoring rubric, specific indicators for the candidate. We have leadership of staff. And as you look at the rubric, you can see the criteria there and what you're looking for. So questions, let me talk just a little bit about questions. The questions that you will be developing, creating, are open-ended. Give the candidates an opportunity to tell their story, to talk about where they have done this, have examples of showing what they've done, where the application is, some of the outcomes that they have from them. So they are open-ended questions. Many questions may be leading to more than one criteria. So as we're thinking of leadership of staff, it also could be, integrating in with personnel relations or something of that nature. But we want to highlight each one of these criteria areas so that you have a commonality or where you're, commonality in your conversation. In the interview process packet, there were other opportunities with many sample questions for you. How we'll do this is really go criteria item, develop some questions. You all will be able to talk about those questions, and we'll create a list, and then we can whittle them down, whittle the list down further until we have what you are comfortable with questions. So in this first area, as we're looking at leadership of staff, some sample questions could be, asking them to talking about themselves or what they've done. How have they? How have they communicated? If there's a situation that you can think of. So I'll just get started, and we'll just let you begin thinking of some of your sample questions.
Deb, I got a question. On the packet that I have in front of me, hopefully it's the right one, with the suggested interview questions, we have section A and professional growth / ethics and integrity with a list of proposed questions or possible questions. Would it be easier just to go through what we have here and kind of do it in that order?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay. So we'll
And then
start
we'll match those to and then we'll match those into, as you come up with the questions, we can then take them and match them into where they fit most in that rubric.
Okay.
So,
So just to be clear for all of our board members, and for my own benefit, Mr. President, are we looking now at the document that the heading says Nevada Association of School Boards Superintendent Search Program, suggested interview questions with a large section A in bold on the page?
That's what I'm looking at, yes.
Okay, just making sure, and
Thank you. Deborah, you can go through the questions, or am I supposed to?
yes,
Okay.
sorry, I was just making sure, thank you. So with professional growth, ethics, and integrity, there are sample questions there. And I can read them all. You have them all in front of you. There are opportunities for you. I think the best thing to do and how we've really had this be successful in the past is each of you take an opportunity to share a question or a topic that you are interested in, and we work through questions that way.
Okay. Joe, you want to start going through section A and suggesting questions, or if you like any of the suggested questions, let us know. Or if you have any else that would fit in that category.
I was looking at it a slightly different way, so I'm not sure I'm the best person to start, but if someone's got an idea what they want specifically for that section, I'd be willing to postpone my time till after.
Laurel, go ahead.
when I went through this in preparation, I just highlighted 3 questions that I liked best out of that group. So I'm happy to share that and see if they correlate with any of the questions that the other trustees may have, if that seems like a way to start.
I think it'd be a good way.
That
Go
would be
ahead,
great.
Laurel. Don, did you have something?
Yeah, I highlighted 3 questions there too. I can add to that afterwards.
Okay. Since Laurel, why don't you go ahead and start?
Okay, I'll go ahead and start. I highlighted on that professional growth, ethics, and integrity. I highlighted questions 2, 4, and 5.
Okay, question 2, tell us what you know about our organization. Question number 4, how would you respond to allegations of unethical behavior in the district? An example may be the recent cases where district personnel have not been honest in the administration or statewide basis, or tests, I'm sorry. And number 5, when have you misread a situation or scenario, and how did you recover? Okay, Don, did you want to put your 3?
Yeah, I actually had 1, 4, and 5. So I overlap on 2 of them. And I like the strengths and weaknesses one. It just gets a chance to see the candidates and, what they think of themselves and as far as their weaknesses and so forth and strengths.
Okay, just for the people who don't have this in front of them, question number 1, what do you see as your administrative strengths and weaknesses? Okay, anybody else, Mike?
For this section, I highlighted 3, 4, and 8.
3, 4, and 8. Okay, thank you. For the audience who may not have this in front of you, question number 3, what do you consider as your most significant accomplishment in education? We've already covered question number 4. Question number 8 reads, in what ways do you ensure your knowledge and skills about academic, fiscal, safety, personnel, and other education issues are current? Thank you, Mike. Stacy?
So I have 2 on this list, and then we had those other interview bank questions. Or we were not supposed to use those?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
We had those other bank questions. The other. not
Yeah,
sure
I-
which page
If I may,
Go ahead.
those are, yes, you had another bank of questions to help supply you with ideas for the types of questions you would want to ask. So they really are there to support your desire for questions.
So I guess just stick to the list and do number 4 and number 8.
Okay. Has everybody got a chance to read the questions that trustee Cassiopo submitted?
No.
I guess we'll come back. We'll go ahead and then everybody can get a chance to read those and then we'll go through those. Go ahead, Lupe, you have anything? Nothing? Lupe, nothing? Does everybody want to take a minute to read the questions Joe submitted to see if they fit into this category?
So, Rich, I can just let you know, well, if they're reading it, that
Go ahead, yeah.
2 of the questions I came up with that closely relate to the bank questions would be bank questions 3 and 4. What do you see? 3 was, what do you see as the role of the superintendent as it relates to employee groups, students in the community? And I had described your experience maintaining positive relationships with the Board of Trustees, bargaining units, families, and community partners. So I think, I'd be okay with, we can wordsmith them, but I'm, in terms of, I guess those are more general, but those are kind of what I saw under that one.
Can I just ask for clarification? I don't see those questions, the other list of bank questions. I've got the ones in this document and then the additional ones from Joe, but I didn't see that as number 3.
No, it's,
So I'm just trying to follow where you're at.
yeah, so I'm actually reading under the what I have is says and sorry about this, people, this is not starting off well, so bear with us.
The one that she gave us.
Superintendent interview questions bank, and it starts out general with questions 1 through 9, and then leadership of staff 10 through whatever, 10 through 18, and then it goes on from there. So I don't know if we're all looking at the same thing.
I think,
That was from the November 15th meeting. Those were in the packet. I have that in front of me as well.
Laurel, it's on your right-hand side there.
I think
That one. That's it. That should be it there.
Because what I did, Rich,
I just would like to be on the same page as everyone, and what I'm seeing on my right hand that Richards keeps telling me is the additional information for agenda item 3, and it's got general questions from Joe Cassiopo 1 through 10, and additional questions from Richard Varner, which aren't numbered, but there are 7. So,
it's this one that came in the first packet we got.
but it's not in our current packet.
We got 2 packets for this meeting.
I only have 1.
Didn't we get 2?
I didn't get a second packet.
Joe, just to clarify, you're talking about the questions you submitted yesterday, is that correct?
so my plan tonight was to kind of go through my questions. When I looked at this, and, I'm not sure what the right or wrong way to do it is, but I used the bank questions as just that, hey, here's some sample questions. If you like them, great. If you want to modify them, great. If you want to create your own questions, great.
Totally fine. I do not have a copy of the bank questions. Stacy showed it to me. I don't have that in my packet.
Gotcha.
And for clarification, this is Deb Oliver. For the record, the question samples are just as Mr. Cassiopo was sharing. They are to multiple questions to help you generate ideas and questions as prompts.
So I think I think this is becoming a very confusing process, and so we started with one document, and now we're talking about 2 separate documents. I would suggest that we continue through the process of going through, we went through section A, people identified questions, and stick to the same document for clarity's sake.
I would agree with that.
So if we're doing that, then what are we doing with Joe and Richards and questions that we might have that we want to put on there? That, because I didn't know we were submitting a list, but I have a couple questions I want to ask. It's not during this section though.
Well, couldn't we just go through those after this document? I mean, we're gonna get
Okay.
a
That's what
pool
I'm
of
asking.
questions
That's
together.
fine. I just want to know when to bring them up.
All right, that's what we'll do. We'll go continue through the document we have in front of us, section A through whatever it is, and then we'll come back to the other questions that people may have. I think we've kind of completed section A, and I don't know, Deb, before we move on, should we choose the 3 questions out of here of what people said already?
I didn't hear I only heard 2 from section A from Stacy. I didn't hear from Lupe yet.
I'm sorry.
And that's why I don't think we can pick the 3 questions now because one of mine was from the question bank that
Okay.
you guys don't have.
Okay,
And you just told me that we're going to go over the questions after we go through this document.
yep, that's fine. We'll
Okay.
just continue on.
But can't we go through top favorites here and then top favorites from the next document so we're all on the same
Right.
page?
So I only have 2 top favorites in that
Okay.
one.
Lupe.
I might suggest we continue through the suggested in the sections that we're in now. In section A, I've highlighted as those questions that were most interesting were number 1, 2, 3, 4, multiple, 5, and 8 were questions to highlight. Would be to have a discussion on what is it about the questions and what are you trying to glean from the question, and narrow this down to potentially 2 or 3 questions in this section.
So the ones I had selected is number 1, 4, and 5.
Okay, Deb, can you lead us through the conversation on this then?
Yes. I'm just highlighting as we go. Because we're looking at the professional growth, ethics, and integrity. Thinking of the characteristics and the qualities that you're looking for in your superintendent. Question number 4 is one that several of you have highlighted with response to unethical behavior and what they might do. 1 and 5 also were recommended by several. In the conversation as you're having about these questions, what is it you want to glean from the candidate with the questions that you're asking? So if we're looking at those, what will give you the best picture of your candidate, I guess, and share why you choose those questions. Or you can just agree and say, hey, you know what? We like 1, 4, and 5. Let's just go with those and move on.
Okay, just a
Go ahead,
thought,
Laurel.
because I didn't have Richard, your top 3 written down or Joe's on this, so I think we can, if you guys narrow those questions down to 3, then we can work with that with everyone. But I feel like we're working with only 5 of us right now.
Yeah, no.
I think we're just gonna go through this document and then we're gonna go back to the additional questions later.
Which, yeah, but I don't have from this document what Joe's top questions were or what Richard's were. 'Cause I kept a scorecard on my,
Joe's were number 3 and 4. Is that correct, Joe, or not? All right, and mine would be number 4. Number 8. And number 3. So we have 2 ways to go from here. We can discuss the main questions that everybody identified, or we can disagree on those and move forward for now. So what's the board preference? Mike?
If we're just putting a bank of questions together that are gonna be selected by the NASB team, then why not just move on to the next section? Because we're not picking, we're putting a pool together, so if those are the ones in the pool, let's just put them in the pool and move on to the next section.
Okay, the main three. Stacy, you have anything to add?
I mean, it looks like to me it's 4 and it's 8, and then you could pick or choose 1, 3, or 5.
I agree, Stacy.
Could I,
Might need a recess.
I think that we should ask for a recess and the board president and Dr. Oliver get a system in place because this really isn't organized and it's not working for me.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of disjointed right now. But I think what we should do is go through section by section, identify the top three, and then just move through the sections, if that's okay.
I'd prefer if we got a plan in place. I feel like we're kind of bouncing all over the place and
Yeah.
we don't, everybody seems to have different information. It's very confusing at this point. Joe's trying to see what papers I have. Stacy has a different set of papers. It doesn't make sense to me what's happening.
All the papers should be in the packet, but we could take a recess if you so desire.
Let's do that for our sake and the sake of the public and just get our ducks in a row.
All right. Deb, we're going to take a brief recess, and I guess I'll call you. Can I call? All right.
Okay,
We'll
thank
be in
you.
recess for 5 minutes. Special meeting back to order at 6:15 PM. What we're going to do is we're going to go through section A through G. Yeah, we're going to go through section A through G. We've already identified the questions on section A except for Joe. Joe, we're going to ask for your input on that section.
Okay, thank you. I would vote for on section A, 2 and 7. Do you want me to read them or you got it?
No, that's fine.
I was the only one who didn't have them.
So it looks like we'll take the top 6 out of this category and move on to section B.
I don't think you want to take the top 6 because you just want to, only because I'm saying we're going to add other questions. So you're going to have like 30 questions from just this sheet, and then we have other questions. So I think Laurel saying the top 3, I think you can proceed with those.
Can I
Yes, go
interject?
ahead.
Because I'm thinking, because we talked about giving a pool of questions to Deb, and then they would take it. So if we give them 5 or 6 in the pool, then they select 3 interview questions? Is that correct, Deb?
Deb, are you back on?
Yes, I'm here.
Did you hear Laurel's question?
No, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear until just you asked if I was on.
Go ahead, Laurel.
Okay, so Joe put forth the questions under section A that he likes, which are question 2 and 7. And then Richard, trustee Varner was saying that we'd pick the top 6 for the pool, and Stacy thought that that was too many, that we'd pick the top 3. So just for clarification purposes, how many questions under each section do you want to put in the pool? Because I'm thinking, the way I'm thinking it's going to be is there's going to be 3 questions, but there might be a pool of more. But can you clarify your intent?
Yes, well, the number in the pool really would be up to you. I would recommend 4 for the pool, and taking the top up to 4 questions in the pool. And then we would be able to use them from there.
Deb,
I can't hear.
Deb, how many questions total are you thinking there are going to be in this interview?
You can have up to 12. I would recommend less than that, 10, and depending on the questions and how they come together to elicit the most information is what we will be looking for. So the broadest questions that give us the most detailed information, we could have 9 questions and it could be up to 12.
And if you look at these 7 categories, right, we have 7, A through G. If we took 4 questions from each, 4 times 7 is 28 questions. So 4 is plenty. 4 is fine with me.
But then that's saying that any of the questions that you or Varner or I want to add to that is not included in that.
Well, I think
28
we can
pool.
add those, and then my thought would be, let's go back and kind of, let's do a once over and say, okay, here's all the questions we think we want to include, and then we're going to add any specific questions that aren't directly in the guide. And then we can go back through and say, yeah, I like that, maybe one of the original 4 we pick falls off.
Well, for my clarification, if you are creating a bank of questions, you can put 32, 36 questions into that bank. We will come up with the questions at the search team, the NASB superintendent search team would come up with those final questions for you out of that bank.
Then that still works for me, because if we pick 4 questions for each category, then we go back and pick some special questions that aren't in there, and we end up with more in some categories. That's fine. That's part of the bank of questions. I'm okay with that.
All right, we'll go on, we'll pick top 5 out of each section. And if my math is right, on this section here, A would be number 6, number 5, number 8, and go ahead.
I didn't hear anyone suggest question 6 as one of theirs. I've got 5 people who selected question 4, 3 for question 8, 2 for question 5, and then 2 for question 3, and 2 for question 1.
Yeah, you're right. I just read it wrong. I'm sorry. So it'd be question number 4, question number 5, and correct me if I'm wrong, this question number 8, and I don't have the figures for number 4. Does anybody?
I have.
Go ahead, Deb.
So I have
I was going to say,
1, 2, 3, 4. 5 people were in favor of question 4.
Right,
3 people were in favor of question 8.
right,
For question 5, 2 people were in favor of question 5. 1 question 1 was 2 people as well, and question 3 was 2 people. Those are what I have with the multiple votes.
That's what I have with multiple votes coming, looking at a top 5 of 1, 3, 4, 5, and 8.
Okay, so if we're going to go with just 4, I guess it'd be 1, 3, 4, and 5. Is that what you're saying? Well, I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
Just keep them all. They had multiple votes, keep them.
Just keep them all if they had
Yeah.
multiple.
All right.
I was going to say, yeah, at one point you had said 4 and then 5. I think the 5 are fine. We can take those as the top and move into the next section.
Okay, we're moving on to section number B. And we'll try to do the same process, but just what we're going to ask is just to identify the question by the number. Joe, on question number B on vision, mission, and goals.
Sure. So I think I'll go with 1, 2, and 3.
Thank you. Mike?
For this section, I selected 2, 4, and 8.
Thank you. Stacy?
I have 3, 4, and 5, but with 4, I'd like to ask if what value they put on a strategic plan, and then ask about the roles.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
I have 1, 2, and 3.
1, 2, 3. Laurel?
And just to clarify, when I was totaling up on section A, I didn't have my numbers totaled, so I had 2, 4, and 5. So it actually gave us 6 wanting 4 and like 3 wanting 5, which were already in there, but I just wanted it on the record. So for this one, section B, I had 2, 4, and 5.
Thank you. Dawn?
I had same as Joe, 1, 2, and 3. But for 1, what would be your priorities for the first 30 days? I had it expanded maybe 30 to 90 days. I'd like to see the first 90 days in the district.
All right, thank you. And for my input, I'd also have number 1, 3, and 5. So if we're going to go with the top 4, we would have 1.
Mr. President,
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just so the record's clear, now that we have all the ones that are identified, I think it would probably be good to have the ones identified read into the record, and then the tally can be taken.
Thank you. We'd have number 1, and that question is, what would be your priorities for the first 30 days in the district? 2 looks like it has the next more votes, and that question is, how would you determine the district's most critical needs? Question number 3, which would be in the top 4, how would you involve your staff in decision-making? Then we have a tie for the next 2, but number 4 would be, what is the superintendent's role in strategic planning, and what is the board's role?
And might I add on number 1, Mr. Kareen had suggested adding for the first 90 days and not the 30 days.
Okay,
And I added on number 4, the important, what they thought, if it was important to have a strategic plan, or however you want to present that.
Okay, yes, I have that as well.
all right, thank you. We'll move on to section number C now. We'll go through the same process. Joe?
So for section C, 7, 8, and 10.
7, 8, 10. Mike?
3, 4, and 10.
3, 4, 10. Stacy?
One, 3, and let's do them through. 6.
1, 3, 6. Lupe?
1, 3, 6.
Laurel?
I had 2, 4, and 7.
Dawn?
I just had 2 for that section, 1 and 7.
1 and 7. I would go with number 1, number 3, and then number 7. So it looks like question number 1 would be one of the top 4. And that question is, what do you feel are the most important functions of the superintendent? Next will be question number 3. Please share how the Board of Education in your current district would describe you. Next will be number 7. How would you use data to guide recommendations to the board, and what type of data? And there again, we have several ties on number 4, so we'll go to question number 4. How would you keep the board informed of developments in the district? Okay. Moving on to section D, finance and budgeting, human resource personnel and facilities. Joe?
I had 3 under, well, they're all just numbered sequentially, so
Right.
3, 5, and 6.
3, 5, 6. Joe? Sorry, Mike.
I selected 3, 9, and 11.
3, 9, 11. Stacy?
I had 5, so I have to take 2 of them out of here. 3, 6, 12. Actually, make it 3, 9, and 12.
3, 9, and 12. And you did say 6 as the number 1. Right. So you're changing 6 to 9. Lupe?
I have 2, 7, and 11. But on 7, is it possible to word it a little bit different to include how we could diversify our staff? I don't know how we would articulate that, but I would like to see that we include we include in the wording on the importance of diversifying the staff.
Okay. Laurel?
I had 3, 5, and 11.
3, 5, and 11. Dawn?
I actually picked 4, 3, 5, 6, and 12. But
3,
5 and 6 can be, you can just go 3, 5, 12 if we're all
3,
just getting
5.
3 votes. And 12, 6, the relationship could be actually built into question 5.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go with 3, 5, and 12. So number 3 would be the top one. Faced with a significant change in revenue, increase or decrease, how would you approach budget development for the upcoming fiscal year? Next would be question number 5. What would you do to ensure we hire and maintain effective teachers, administrators, and other personnel? Next would be 12. How would you determine facility and maintenance needs? Discuss your point of view regarding maintaining, remodeling facilities versus replacement of facilities. Was that 3?
That's 3, and number 11 also received 3 votes.
Okay. Then number 11 would be describe effective methods you have used to ensure the safety of students and staff. Moving on to section E, teaching and learning. Joe?
So I think I'll cheat and give you 4 here. 1, 2, 3, and 9. But on 2, I would like to add to that. 2 is what actions would you take to make sure every student is learning? And then I would expand on it and say, how would you track and measure it? And then the same thing for 9. I think I would add the same thing to that.
Okay, same thing in 9. Okay, thank you. Mike?
So I selected 3, 4, and 9.
3, 4, 9. Thank you, Mike. Stacy?
I selected the same 3, 4, and 9. But I like what Joe added it on number 9 about how to track and measure.
Okay. Yes.
So just make a suggestion though, Deb, if that question is selected, I don't think we want 2 times that we're asking the person how they track and measure. I think one
Agreed.
question like that would be appropriate.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Yes, thank you.
Stacy? Lupe, I'm sorry.
I have 2, 4, and 7.
2, 4, and 7. Laurel?
I had 1, 4, and 9, but I'm thinking that 1 is very closely related to 3. So I don't know if there's a way to make those with what I did. 1, 4, and
Dawn?
2, 3, and 9.
2.
If I may interrupt just for a second for some clarification, we would have the opportunity to combine those questions. Laurel had mentioned district. Somehow rearrange the wording, obviously, but combine. Was it 1 and 3, Laurel, that you had just said?
yeah, they can tie in together. So
Yes. So if 1 become in the question bank, we would be able to do that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go with 3, 9, and number 4. So it looks like question number 3, how do you determine if professional development provided by the district is improving student learning and teacher/administrator performance? Number 4, Describe how you have addressed the diverse training needs of students. Number 9, how would you create/maintain a culture of learning and continuous improvements in the district? And then it looks like question number 2, what actions would you take to make sure every student is learning? And then we'd add, how would you track and measure it? Section number F, collaboration with families and community. Joe will go through the same process.
2, 4, and 7.
2, 4, 7. Okay. Mike?
I selected 2, 5, and 6,
2, 5, and 6.
but I also liked 7. So if I could have a fourth vote, that would be it.
Okay.
I took one.
Lupe?
4, 6,
I'm
and
sorry. Stacy, I'm sorry. I missed you.
No worries. 4, 7, and 8.
4, 7, 8. Now Lupe.
4, 6, and 7.
4, 6, 7. Laurel?
4, 5, and 7.
4, 5, 7. Dawn?
2, 4, 7.
2, 4, 7.
And I'll add on 4. I would maybe lose the word patrons and maybe put members of the community or something like that.
All right, thank you. I'm also going to go with 4, 7, and 2. So it looks like we'll have question number 2. What is the superintendent's role in public relations for the district? Question number 4. Community engagement and connectivity are vital for a school district. What will you do to ensure the community members feel ownership and value in the school district? Number 7, how would you approach decisions that may be unpopular but necessary to achieve district goals? We have a tie for 2 here. We got a tie for 5 and 6. I think we can go with 5. How have you been successful with involving parents in promoting students' academic achievement? Okay, section G, the education system. We only have 5 questions here. Joe?
What about 5 questions? Sorry.
I said we only have 5 questions in this section here, so
Yeah, I selected 2, 3, and 5.
2, 3, 5. Mike?
I selected 1, 3, and 4.
1, 3, 4. Stacy?
1, 3, 5.
Lupe?
2, 3, and 5, but on number 3, could we reword it and end it with can we replace the word district with student? So how might you develop a relationship with institutions of higher education to benefit the students?
What about if we put student and district or something like that?
That too.
Laurel?
Oops. I had 1, 2, and 4.
Dawn?
I had just two of them, 1 and 4. And on 4, I wouldn't mind seeing both positive and negative working relationships among districts. I'd love to hear him talk about that as well.
Positive and negative. I'm going to go with number 1, number 3, and number 4. Number 1, the first question would be, what role does the superintendent play in public education advocacy at local, state, and national levels? Then we have question number 3. How might you develop a relationship with institutions of higher education to benefit the students and district? Number 4, in what ways might students be affected by positive and negative working relationships among district, community, county, and state agencies? And then we have a tie between question number 2 and 5. Okay, we'll just do with the top 3 there. Is that all right? All right. All right.
So, okay. Did five didn't make the top 3? I'll be okay, I'm just asking.
It was tied with number 2. That's why I had it. I had 3 for number 2 and then 3 for number 5.
Okay. I just a little, I chose 5 for what it's worth, just because I think internal communication is something, when I get emails internally from staff, that question tends to come up quite a bit, so that's why I thought that was a relevant question to consider in
Okay,
this.
we can leave that as question number 4 if the board agrees.
I'm happy with whatever the board thinks, but that was my
Well-
rationale behind that.
It's a pool of questions, so I mean, I don't see any harm in adding that.
Okay, we'll leave that in. Thank you. All right, Deb, how do you suggest we move on to the questions that were submitted by Joe and myself and/or other people who may have additional questions for miscellaneous questions, I guess?
I think the best thing to do would be, thank you, I should say, this is Deb Oliver for the record. Yeah, I think the best thing to do would be to have Mr. Casiopo, Stacy, or who I should say, whoever has read or has their questions, have them read them through. I believe you all have a copy of them in front of you. So each go through and thinking of the questions that you already have in the bank, the pool of questions, look at these and see if there are some additional questions that you would like to add into the pool of questions. So it would be having each of you read the questions that you have created.
Okay, Joe's got 10 questions. You want him to read all of them?
My thought, if I could,
Go ahead.
was I'm happy to read them if you guys want to, but what I was doing while we were doing this other one, and I was trying to best align the questions I had into those categories A through G or whatever it was. And so my thought would be, I don't care if they all get in there or not, but I was thinking like question 1, I thought best fit in the categories B or E, and it could be thrown into the pool for either one of those. And then I thought NASB could make the determination if it should go in one category, both categories, or not at all.
That would,
And I kind of put mine in order. So like, if somebody said you only get one question, which one do you want? I would say number 1. That's kind of how I went through this.
for some reason, it keeps cutting out and we aren't able to hear.
Can you hear us now?
I can now, thank you.
Okay, what he suggested was that his number one question would be his number one on the list that he has.
Okay.
But, oh, go ahead, Laurel.
I was just going to say, Joe, I think that also that question number 1 that you have could tie into section E, question 2, as a way to track and measure it. They're related quite a bit.
Kind of why I was thinking when NASB pulls this together, I mean, if it gets morphed into another question, or I'm flexible. I just, to me, that was an important question to ask, and it went from a 7-line question down to 3 or 4. So once my wife stopped falling asleep, I knew I was getting close to length.
All right, Deb, I guess I'm kind of stumped how to proceed here. Should he go ahead and read the questions, or just the board read them and say they like a certain amount of the questions and identify the ones they like to give you some guidance?
Let's do that. Let's just since everybody has a copy of the questions in front of them, you can go through again and say which are ones that you like, and we will be looking at these questions and being able to insert or work with and massage some of the questions from the question bank to make sure that we are, again, giving the most opportunity for your candidates to share their experiences, their thoughts, and everything. So there may be a combination of questions. But yes, right now, if you all read those, and then we can go through and see which questions raised to the top.
All right, I was kind of thinking maybe we'd do it like we did before, just go down and
Sure.
then have people identify the first 3 choices.
Yes.
All right. Mike, have you had a chance to read through them?
Yeah, I liked 1. I liked 3. And then probably I would say either 2 or 10. But I think 1 and 3 are my
Okay.
tops.
Joe, I didn't mean to leave you out. You have your top 3?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3.
Stacy?
3, 5, 10.
Lupe?
1, 2, and 5.
Laurel?
1, 2, and 10.
Dawn?
I actually don't have a copy since I'm not there. But you guys go ahead. It's okay.
Mr. Varner, let me forward the questions real quick to Mr. Carini.
Dawn, Renee's going to forward those questions to you real quick.
And Rich, sorry, just while she's doing that, just for the benefit of others, since you probably don't know what's rattling around in my head, when I have question 1 and 10, and they both mention our strategic plan, and I was trying to figure out how to get it in there. And so I initially I just said, hey, are you familiar with our plan? Do you like it or hate it? And then I kind of threw it into question 1, thinking if they like it, it's going to play some kind of role in that. So that's why I have it in both places. So if that helps clarify why I did it that way, that's why I mentioned it twice.
So, Joe, could I suggest, instead of saying, are you familiar with our strategic plan? I would say, what do you think the strengths of our strategic plan are? And so then we're assuming positive intent, and then that they've done some homework. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
'Cause if they just said no.
Right.
then
No, I'm
it's-
fine with that. That's why
Yeah.
I purposely put that as number 10, because once I had it already in 1, I wasn't sure where it should fit, and it kind of fell to the bottom of the list after that. So I'm comfortable with it being massaged.
All right, Mike, if I hear you right, what you want to do is just add, what do you think are the strengths of our strategic plan? Is that the way you want to reword it?
Yeah, we don't want yes or no questions, because if they said, no, I'm not familiar with it, you know.
Okay. And Dawn, do you have the questions yet? Okay. Then in the meantime, I'll go ahead and give my input. I would like to go with number 1. I like number 7. And number 5. So Don, if you're ready, just let us know when you're ready.
I haven't seen them yet, but don't worry about me. Go ahead and tally them up. That's fine. Really.
All right, thank you, Don. We'll go with question number 1. Describe your goals for student achievement, considering classroom evaluations, MAP, SBAC, ACT/SAT, and graduation rates, and the metrics you will use to track and maintain accountability while also addressing teacher/staff morale, and what role will the Empower Carson City 2022 strategic plan have in your administration? Then it'd be question number 2. Describe issues you have observed from your experience as an educational leader, and what do you see as the top 2 issues the CCSD should focus on your first year and throughout the next 4 years? We have question number 3. Please provide measurable examples of the characteristics, qualities, and vision that make you the best candidate for superintendent of our district. Number 4 would be question number 5. What is your current position? Why do you want to leave it? And why is the position of superintendent in our district of interest to you? All right, moving on. And I just had some really basic questions, I think, that are kind of covered in some of the questions that Joe had. And if there's anything interesting in these questions that you may want to submit or have for consideration, Joe?
Yeah, when I looked at them, I originally picked your first one and your last 2, but your first one was covered already in
Right.
one of them. So really, I think the 5th one, because I didn't hear really a whole lot about the about budgeting. So I kind of thought, it's kind of interesting. How do you like spending money you don't have?
Yeah. All right, Mike, any?
The same thought. I really think the other ones are covered well, but budgeting might be something to look at.
Yeah.
And then I just have a thought when you're talking about, like, the question, what is your current job? Why are you leaving your position? I mean, you're looking at somebody who's applying to be a chief executive of a school district. I mean, that seems like a very basic question that's not well suited for this type of an interview, but that's my opinion. I'm just saying, I think that we probably want to go for a little bit heavier questions.
Yeah, I agree. Stacy?
Yeah, I like number 5 with the deficit spending.
Number
That was my
5.
favorite.
Lupe?
5 as well.
Okay. Laurel?
Yeah, I think 5. I think the other questions are pretty much summed up in some of the other
I
questions.
think so
we've
too. Dawn, I know you don't have them in front of you, so it'll be question number, it would be 5, but question would read, have you been involved in deficit financing? What is your philosophy on deficit spending? And that'd go in the bank of the miscellaneous questions. Now, Deb, I think that's all the questions we have. So I'm going to turn it back over to you. Go ahead.
I didn't write mine, but I have 3.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And then you guys can decide if you like them or not and
Yeah.
include them. The first one was one of the ones that Brian gave us, was please tell us about your experience you have with collective bargaining, and I would add interest-based bargaining. on both management and the teacher side of the table and what the best role is for the superintendent.
Okay. Go ahead, next one.
How do you handle disputes, complaints with our associations or unions? Because maybe some of these places, they don't call them associations. How do you handle the disputes, complaints with our association and the board?
Stacy, one thing I'm kind of wondering, if you look at some of those questions we talked about, like the positive and negative like working relationships, and I think it would address those.
But I don't know if it would. I think it needs to be real specific because we've had such a good relationship with our associations that I think if we don't ask it directly, we won't get an answer that we want, or not want, but get the answer that we want, get a feel for what they're about with unions and associations. That's my only thought. I know it's in there a couple times, but I don't feel if we don't pull it out, we're not going to get to the matter. And I would hate to have somebody come in and undo everything we've worked on for the last 20 years.
So maybe I mean, I see that being reasonable. Maybe instead of creating another question, it can be incorporated into, the question, so we can kind of hit a couple of points in one question. Because I think those are strong points that need to be included.
The person we're gonna, you know what I mean? Anybody who has experience is gonna reference that. If they don't, they're not gonna be the type of person we want to lead our district. So, I mean, I think it's kind of like the cream coming to the top. I think I agree with Joe if we're gonna embed it, but if you lead the horse to water, I mean, they're gonna know the key words, what you're looking for.
So you don't think we need to know about their experiences that they've had?
Well, I
with
think
collective
it's just
bargaining?
asked in a way that they could answer it, and then you kind of gauge the way they answer.
One thing I was trying to do when I was coming up with my questions and thinking about all the questions was, I've been interviewing people for 20 plus years now, and I've been interviewed a bunch of times. And sometimes, the questions we would ask, or I would be asked, describe your strengths and weaknesses, describe this, and kind of leading the horse to water thing. I never heard anybody really give me a terrible answer going, well, I have all these weaknesses, and let me list them for you. So I stopped asking that question because why waste anybody's time? And then I kind of like where Mike's going with that is we, hopefully, as we're interviewing these clients, these candidates, we're getting a sense of these issues that are important to us, because I think our relationship with our associations and how we approach collective bargaining is key. And if they don't, if they're not addressing that,
So
I'd be concerned about that. But I'm okay having it embedded in a question and just having maybe a
Right.
deeper question.
So if we leave it in one of those questions when we're interviewing, can I ask that specific part of it if they don't cover that? Even though we're not going to ask it of every single applicant.
This is, if I may, this is Deb.
Go ahead,
Deb.
Deb.
There's a delay of the view. The questions, you will be asking the same questions of each one. So if it was a question, Stacy, that you were precise with one, you would need to ask it to all of them. I might recommend right now that you add this content to this bank of questions. We will be able to massage or could potentially massage it into, like the one question that you were talking about with positive, negative relations, by specifically asking, to give an example of what they've done or what they might do with that situation, with a dispute or complaint with an association.
Laurel?
Just a thought, Mike, anyone who is going to be interviewed is probably going to watch this, and now they're all going to say interest-based bargaining because they're watching
Yeah,
it.
we're not gonna be able to keep any of this a secret from anybody, but
Well, I think that, and my point is just, highly educated people are gonna know where, if you're very specific, you're almost, you know what I mean? You're almost gonna get those, like I said, the canned answers. And I'd much rather get a sense of who these people are and what their experiences are and their beliefs. And I think that just the more open-ended questions are gonna kind of allow that to happen more naturally.
Stacy, did you have another question too? And we'll decide what to do
Nope,
with
it
this one.
sounds like my other question will be rolled in with something else.
Lupe, go ahead.
So I know we haven't talked much about how we could ask the candidates to give us their, to share with us their knowledge and experience about how they serve underserved student population. So I have a question that probably needs a little bit of work, but this is what I have. Describe how you support student success among diverse students, especially Latinos.
Okay, describe how you, would you repeat that one more time?
Describe how you support student success among diverse students, particularly Latinos.
and that one kind of rolls, when I reviewed the candidates, that's another one. I'm hoping when I hear from these, whoever we interview, they're gonna discuss things like that. If they don't, I would have some concerns. And then it just goes to the level at which they're doing it, but I would imagine we're gonna hear that. I'm not saying not to have that question, but that's something I'm hoping we're gonna hear from candidates. I'd be shocked if we didn't.
Any other discussion on Lupe's questions? Seeing none. Laurel, did you have any questions?
No.
Dawn, do you have any questions that were not submitted?
I do not.
Deb, one of the things that I think I didn't see in here, but the reality in our schools at every level right now is extreme behaviors. And I think it's probably best addressed with a question about the place of social emotional learning in education. But these are the things that parents are emailing us about and calling Mr. Stokes about. And I think that this is kind of a reality that's going to be around for a while. And I don't know if you have any questions around that or not.
Deb, were you able to hear Mike's question?
I was, thank you. I was talking without unmuting. Yeah, Mike, I think you're accurate in to say that we with extreme behaviors and what is the place of SEL in education. If that is a topic that you would like, we can embed that. I think there are several questions that we've looked at previously that we would be able to embed that in, or have that be a part of a question. There, much
so
like
Deb,
we added. Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I necessarily have a question to add, but I would appreciate it if you could find a way to work that into some of our questions, because that's going to be the reality, and it's going to be what
Yes,
parents
thank
are
you.
contacting them about right away.
Yes, I guess that's what I'm meaning. If this is a topic, we can definitely embed it into questions.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Any other discussions about the questions before you turn it back over to Deb? Seeing none. Deb, we're going to go ahead and turn it back over to you to lead the discussion.
Thank you. I just had one question. Stacy had the first question that she had asked. Please tell us about the experience you have with. I missed some of that, and I wasn't sure if that was one you were adding to the bank of questions.
Stacy, you want to repeat it?
I can repeat it, but it sounded like you guys were just going to put it all together with something else. Please tell us about your experiences you've had with collective bargaining on both management and teacher side of the table,
Okay.
and what the best role is for the superintendent.
Okay, I'm sorry. I did have that. I thought you had one prior to that. Okay, thank you.
Laurel?
Just for the record,
have-
I'm fine if Stacy's question is added to our pool of questions.
Yeah, I'm fine with it too.
My point was that either way is fine with me, so I'll leave it to your discretion.
If we can't add it, you can embed it in maybe something else as you go through these questions, Deb.
Yes, we'll work that, see how we can work that in.
Thank you.
Okay,
We're going to move on to you, Dr. Oliver.
thank you. Let me just finish a couple notes right here so I don't get lost. Your next step right now would be, I believe, to have a motion to say that the questions that you have just discussed or those that you have agreed upon would be the bank of questions that we would work with. But I believe you need to have that approved in this process right now.
Mr. President, you have this listed as one agenda item with 3 subparts. I've taken notes on what I believe your motion will be when the time comes, but I think this part, or the questions, will be one part of a motion on the entire agenda item.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. I want to just walk through the process. Earlier, you were discussing a little bit about some of the questions, maybe being too specific. At the very beginning, the onset of the interview, you will give your candidates time to tell their story, tell a bit about them, where they're from. They may share their desires for moving to Carson City, their desires for becoming a superintendent, but you'll give them time to give you a get to know you kind of time prior to asking your questions. So that will come and you will get to know them a bit prior to asking your questions. There are to try and keep this so that you are informed of what's going on, we will take your questions. We will put them in an order and assign them to each one of you as trustees so that you have those questions on the day of your interviews to be able to ask those specific questions. So that you have those and they're ready to go. Well, each interview will be held on Zoom. There'll be about 75 minutes, 75 to 90 minutes, depending on what you're doing. You'll take some time in between each interview to review your thoughts, write down your ideas, do your scoring, take a look at them, and then you'll come back for a second interview. The next candidate. These meetings will go, you'll have one on the 25th and one on the 26th, and they are specifically for these interviews so that you can have the time specifically devoted to these, to the interviews.
So Deb, I would suggest that we conduct these interviews in one day. So there's not one candidate who's watching the interviews and then they have a day's head start. I think that with the number we're going to probably whittle it down to, we could facilitate those interviews in one day. And then that also, those of us who work, that's less time we're having to take away from work as well.
Okay.
If that is your preference, you can do them 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, with a lunch break and some time break. It's a lot of information coming in, but obviously you would be able to handle that. So if that is your desire, we most certainly can schedule those in on one day.
Mike, I think it'll depend on how many candidates we choose to interview. If we stick with the top 4, would be fine in one day.
Okay. And I just have a question, because I've been involved in our district's process with interviewing for principal positions, and our district has a performance element of our interview process where the principals go through a coaching session or the principal candidates go through a coaching session with a role playing of teachers. Is there any plans to have any type of performance interview portion of this? And then my other question along with that is we also usually receive a writing sample from the candidates who are being interviewed. It could be something like a welcome back letter for students or something like that. But I would like to see a writing sample from our final candidates as well. So questions, performance portion of the interview, and writing sample.
We can get a writing sample from each one of the candidates that you choose. The performance is not something that is typically something that we've done with or is typically done with a superintendent. What we are aware that in the district there is that performance element within your processes that you have there. That is something that for round 2, when you have your top 2, we will be having more of a performance type of a question, a very broad question for them where they will be coming in and looking at things. And at that time, we can look at doing something that is a performance-based for you, or we can look at that for the second round.
Is that agreeable to the board?
Yeah, that's fine with me. I didn't really want to do a performance eval on this initial round.
Yeah, I think it'd be better for the second top 2 or whatever we interview.
I kind of like the performance thing with the 4, just because some of these are close, and we don't know some of these that might be going, but I'm fine either way. But I would like a writing sample. I think that's important.
Deb, I guess, could you incorporate a writing sample in the first round of interviews?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
As far as a writing sample, I mean, do we have any thoughts on a writing sample regarding what?
I don't really have any thoughts. I mean, I've read each and every one of their letters that they submitted for interest in the job. They're all did a great job in those letters, I thought. But
I'm just wondering, are we looking for a sample on their ideas about things, or are we going to do spelling and grammar?
Well, we didn't with the last principal interviews I was in. They did a welcome letter, and they were both new, and so it was a welcoming letter towards the parents and the staff, and it did tell a little bit about them. Mrs. Roquetta's was really good, but maybe just something like that, a welcoming letter as their first letter that would go out as a superintendent. And then
Okay.
just kind of see what direction they take with that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was just curious what we were hoping to get out of it.
Deb, what's your thoughts on that?
So yeah, we will incorporate that when you narrow down to your top candidates. We will make sure that we have a letter submitted along with when they are coming into interview. So yes, we can do that.
All right, thank you. Deb, go ahead.
I'm just trying to think back. In the each candidate will be asked the same questions. The types of follow-up questions that you would be following up any of the questions that you're asking are for clarification purposes only. It's not asking them a new question or a new set of questions or something different. It really is for clarification purposes that you would be wanting them to go further into, clarify something, but it's not asking a new question. And then you can take time in between each one of the questions that you ask to do some notes, or you can continue and do it all at the end. I suggest you take a minute or two to write down some thoughtful notes about each one, especially if you're going to do 4 in a day. Things that stand out to you, key words that they might have said, but take some time in between each question to write down your thoughts of what you've just done quickly, because you don't want to take so much time. Do you have any questions about the process for the interviews?
Well, I have a question, Deb. This is Joe. Are we thinking, as far as timing goes on the process, you're talking about 75 minutes roughly per candidate. Some may go less. I'm anticipating most will go over. Are we thinking like starting every 2 hours, 8, 10? Let's say we're doing 4, 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, then probably some kind of break, and then 2 and 4 or 1 and 3, or what are you thinking as far as how close do we stage these folks?
Well, we have, so they would be, we would have 2-hour time blocks for each one of the candidates, and that would give you approximately 90 minutes for your interview, 75 to 90 minutes for the interview. You'd have a half hour to 40 minutes, depending, a half hour between interviews for your a bio break, your scoring, your notes, you're thinking about reflecting on that interview, and the next one would then begin. You'll take a lunch break, and then again doing the 2 and 2, 2 hours, a 2-hour time block per candidate. Having that limited time, there are several things that you're looking at, is how concise, but are they with their responses? To knowing, they will also know that they have 75 to 90 minutes for this.
So one more. Oh, go ahead, Laurel. I saw you going first. Go ahead. And maybe it's a question for Ryan. Ryan, let's say we're anticipating we're going to ask everybody 12 questions, and candidate 1, we only get through 7 questions. Now, are we just doing 7 questions for everybody else, I assume?
You mean if you're with the first candidate, you only get through 7 because of time?
Yes.
I think you're going to have a bank of up to 12 that you can get through. I wouldn't think you would be limited in subsequent interviews by a first candidate taking more time.
Okay.
So from a legal standpoint, I'd be comfortable with you having your bank of questions to be asked, time allowing.
Okay.
Well, and Joe, one of the things in Lyon County is there's a time limit, and we tell the candidates that, and so to plan their questions accordingly, and then a copy of the questions are there so they know. And that also kind of shows.
Kind of helps them.
Yeah, and it also shows us, are they organized or not?
Yeah, fair enough.
Laurel?
I just have a question about the logistics, because we're going to do that on Zoom, and it looks like we're doing it in the theater. I just want to make sure that we have the candidates not calling in, because I think it's difficult to interview. How will we logistically have it set up with technology? Are we going to be in our own homes doing Zoom on a traditional Zoom, or are we going to be in the theater here at the community center? And then will we have the candidates on a screen where we can see them? How is that going to work?
Mr. Stokes?
We are still working out some of those details, but the initial interviews were expected to be done using electronic means, and we would be meeting in the theater next door. We wanted to have a room that was big enough to house as many people who wanted to come. This room obviously has been reduced in size over time with this remodel, and there's limited time that the theater next door is actually available. As you know, other entities use this room. And so, yeah, did I answer all your questions? So we are planning on having the event next door in the theater.
And will we be able to see the candidates on video, or will it be audio only like it is right now with Dr. Oliver?
I believe it's videoed, well, it will be via Zoom, and we have that ability to see the individual and listen to them, but those interviews will be virtually done.
And I think for clarification, I like the idea of it being on Zoom so we can see them. And I've had people ask me, and I heard some chatter in the audience too about, how come we don't just bring them all out here? This kind of stuff, typically my experience, and I've never done a superintendent, but if we're going to bring an executive out here, we're going to pay for their travel and usually and all that kind of stuff. So there's an expense to the district. So we thought we would do this via Zoom. And then when we narrow it down to final candidates, we would I would think we'd bring them out here, and that would all be conducted in person. My understanding is we're going to do everything via Zoom.
Yeah, we talked about that, and we felt that to have everybody on an even playing field, that we'd conduct Zoom meetings for everyone, even the local candidates, or candidate, or whatever it turns out to be.
So a follow-up question is, if it's going to be a Zoom meeting, we as trustees could be participating in it someplace other than the theater, correct? Because we're not going to deliberate, so we're going to take our notes, right?
But we are going to deliberate.
So my understanding is that you guys, or the intention that I remember from the last meeting, was that you guys would be present in person with all the applicants available by Zoom. You always have the option of participating in your board meetings virtually if that's what you choose to do. My understanding is at the end of the interviews, there would be deliberation on narrowing down the candidate list. So there would be deliberation in action.
Don, before we move on, do you have any input or questions to this point?
No, I'm just listening.
All right, thank you. Deb, please continue.
Okay, so we will be all in the room, and yes, you will have that deliberation and action at the end of the 4 or 5 or 6, however many you choose candidates to go. A couple of special things that are in here is just remember that you think of the 80-20 rule when you're doing your interviews, that 80% of the time should be the candidate talking, and 20% or less is you all doing the talking, a lot of listening, and being virtual. As we've become somewhat more comfortable with being virtual, but still is very important to look at the camera. They may be looking at the whole room as it's going on. There's always the chance of a delay, but is to be looking as much as you can toward the camera, or being very as though you're listening and looking to them, being positive in that way. So those are just some of the generalities of what will happen on that day for the process. So let me go back to, shall we now move into looking at the pool of candidates?
I'm sorry, yes. Let's move on.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just getting my my screens kind of set up so I have them here. One moment. I have a lot open. So I would like to start this portion with the candidates, is the wonderful pool of candidates that applied for this position. We are in a national place, or nationally, where superintendent positions are not having many applicants, There's several districts, I'll just use Alaska as an example, where they've had 3 superintendent searches happening now where they have had no applicants. So the 10 applicants that have applied for the position, really you've got some caliber candidates to look at and choose from. As a superintendent search team, we looked into, and we have a process we went through and came up with what we would recommend as the top 4 candidates. I know in previous meetings that you wanted to look at all of the candidates. I believe you're all aware of who the 4 recommendations that we have. But I think at this point in time, it might be it would be a good idea to go through, much like you were the questions that you just had, and talk about listing the top 4 candidates that you all found as you were looking at their applications and letters and things that they had. So that way you all have a voice in what you're saying and see how that matches up, and we will take that conversation from there. So Mr. Varner, you might want to go through the group and go through, and each of you can talk about the top 4 candidates that you have that you found.
Well, I went along with your recommendations on the top 4, and we have Miranda Kogan, Kogon, that we can discuss. Next was a John Goldhart, Dr. Goldhart. And I know I'm going to get this name wrong. Vanessa Gutierrez. He's also a Dr. Gutierrez. And then we have Andrew Fueling, AJ Fueling. That was the top 4 that was recommended by NASB. So if the board wanted to go through those and kind of give us your thoughts on each of those candidates, and then we'll have to make a determination if we're going to accept those 4 or replace them with somebody else. And so, Joe, if you don't mind starting.
I was hoping you'd pick me last this time. That's fine. So I don't have an issue with any of the 4. I mean, I read through I've read everybody's info twice over the course of the time we've had this information. And, everybody has obviously administrative experience. And then what I was looking at is, it's, for me, I like to see that there's some teaching experience involved in there as well. I think you're not going to understand the classrooms if you haven't taught in the classroom. And Mr. Fueling has taught in the classroom prior to his, work as a finance officer. Some of the other candidates had alluded to that they had some classroom teaching experience. Some indicated a number of years, but when I went through their resumes, I couldn't come up with that number of years. I saw where they maybe spent a semester, a year or 2, those kinds of things. Some did, but not all of them did. So really what I was struggling with is making sure we had kind of a balance of candidates, because I was interested in how they compare. So I'm being long-winded in saying I look at someone like Dr. DeJoseph here in our district, who doesn't have any district level experience, but she's had elementary, secondary coaching, for lack of a better term, experience and site administration experience. And I think that's interesting. Everybody brings something unique to the table, and that's kind of what she brings, if you will. And as somebody local, born and raised here kind of thing, I was thinking she'd be somebody worthwhile interviewing, either in addition to the 4 or maybe as one of the top 4. I didn't have an issue with anybody, but if we're I'll try to stick to the top four. I've got some thoughts about all the candidates, but one of the top four was, and I'm looking up because I can't say her name either. Berenice Gutierrez. She had an interesting application, interesting resume. Obviously, very well diverse in bilingual education and, all that type of stuff. But it seems like that was really her focus. And as we interview her, I'd kind of like to get a sense of what has she done outside of that as well, because I think we want a well-rounded person. So I liked what she represented, but I wanted to see more. Mr. Goldhart, Dr. Goldhart, he kind of shined. He looked like he had some solid experience, so I'm good with him. The other woman, Miranda Kogan, again, interesting experience. She has some special education experience that I liked. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm good with the four, but I'm kind of leaning towards, I would throw Jen D. Joseph into the mix as well for the reasons I mentioned. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Mike?
So I'll concur with Joe. I mean, I'm fine with the four recommendations. I think that district level leadership experience is important. These are tough times. And I think that to hire somebody without that experience in this position it'd be a detriment to the district. And I think the person we do need to add on is Tasha Fuson as our deputy superintendent. She has steered the district through some difficult times with COVID, and I think that she should at least have a chance at this job.
Thank you, Mike. Stacy?
Yeah, I kind of concur with the four. I kind of think Gutierrez is our Rooney choice if you were doing an NFL coach.
Is your
The
what?
Rooney rule for diversity. Sorry. Should have been during NAAA meeting. Make more sense. I would like to see to interview Tasha just because, like, I agree with Mike. I think these are tough times. There's not a lot in a couple of these that they have that level even of assistant superintendent role or director. So I'd like to at least hear from Tasha. It's kind of what I feel like what we do with our associate superintendents is like what we try to do with our administrators is trying to roll them into those principalships and then the principals into part of the director boards. So I don't mind the four, but I would like to see Tasha in there.
Okay. Lupe?
I concur with that. I also would like to give Tasha the opportunity to interview. I think she has done a lot for the district. So definitely, she's one of my choices. And then I also believe in, again, diversification. So I definitely would like to give Berenice Gutierrez an opportunity to at least interview, and we can learn more about what she is bringing to the table. And then John Goldhart, obviously very strong candidate. And then I also think Andrew Fueling deserves an opportunity for an interview.
I'm sorry, I missed that last part.
Andrew Fueling, I think we should give him an opportunity also.
Laurel?
I agree. I think we have 3 outstanding candidates who have applied from our district. I think that I'd like to interview Tasha. I think she has more experience at a district level than some of the candidates in NASB's top 4. I would also like to interview Dr. Ward DeJoseph because I think she has a variety of experience. I know she doesn't have as much district level, but she also she's got the dedication to this district that is unparalleled. So I think that is something worth examining, and her experience at the elementary and middle school levels. So I'd like to see that. And I know I'm adding more people to the list, which we don't want to do. So I would like to interview our 3 internal applicants. And then from that, the next 2 would probably be Berenice Gutierrez, because I think she has more experience, and John Goldhart has more experience than Miranda Kogan seemed to have. But I'm okay if we do them all, and I know I just didn't really narrow the field very much, but that's where I'm at.
Thank you. Don, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm actually definitely. I would like to the 3 local candidates from our school district. I think that would be important that they were involved in this. Something I think is important here is I want someone who wants to live in Carson City. I want someone that hopefully will cap off their career here. And these 3 internal candidates have proven that. If I were to pick a 4th, I would pick Berenice as the 4th candidate. Our 3 internal plus Berenice.
Okay. My thoughts are, I don't mind adding additional people, but I don't know, NASB spent a lot of time vetting these candidates, and I don't know if it would be right to disregard their recommendations and adding people who they didn't rate as high, for lack of a better term. But if we added more people, then we'd have to add another day onto the interview process. So that'd be the 25th and 26th. So I guess it's up to the board. And Deb, before we move on, do you have any ideas or any suggestions for us on this matter?
Hello, no, and thank you all for sharing your thoughts on all of them. If with internal candidates, it is typical to have at least one of your internal candidates to be interviewed. Potentially you have 2. You guys will actually potentially have 3. If they are strong candidates that you feel are that you would like to interview for the reasons to become your superintendent, then by all means you should interview them. It's not just interviewing as a safety net. And I'm really not trying to say that any of you are thinking that or doing that, but that is something to consider. If you do add the other 2 internal candidates, as President Varner said, you would just need to add that second day. 6 interviews in a day would be rather hefty, along with the deliberation for them. I will let you know, as we were going through, we had the top 4 in the next round of what would be a 5 and a 6, that Tasha Fuson was in that right there, just below that top 4. And I don't want to say below, that was a tough cutoff line for 4. So that was our conclusion.
All right, thank you. I guess what I heard for most of the people on the board was they'd like to interview the additional 2 candidates from the district here. Any other thoughts about adding another day, or do we do 6 interviews instead of the 4? Joe, go ahead.
Just to belabor it a little more, I guess. I don't have a problem doing 6 candidates. With this option of Zoom, there's some flexibility, because I understand work schedules and all that. I'm going to have to, take time off from work as well. So I completely understand that. But because we're doing it on Zoom, if your work schedule or your personal situation is such that you can't physically be here, we have avenues to allow that as well. And then, to Mike's point, I completely agree with Mike. District experience is very important. And I think interviewing someone like Dr. DeJoseph, while she doesn't have that, that probably will shake out in the interview process as well. But, I think we've got some real strong candidates, and it's not just giving everybody a chance, in my opinion. I think they each have, like all of us, they have their pros and cons, if you will, as certainly I do. But I think the pros are interesting enough to where I'd like to give them a chance to sell us on why they think they're the right fit.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Mike?
And I still recommend the top 5 with Tasha. So the top 4 recommendations and then Tasha.
And not Dr. Joseph is what he's, okay. Stacy, any other comments or suggestions from you?
Can we ask them what the difference between our 2 internal candidates that didn't make it? Is that Ryan?
You're asking if you can ask Dr. Oliver right now what the difference in the rankings was? Sure.
So Deb, can you tell us the difference in the rankings and what your people said about the other 2 and why they didn't make the top 4?
With Tasha Fuson, she has the teaching, building, and district administrative experience. The emphasized relationship building as something that was there. The difference, I think, really what you're asking, the difference was the time in the district level position she was in and having the opportunity to, it just didn't, in a comparative way, it just wasn't as strong as the ones that made it in the top 4.
Then I would guess that it's the same with Dr. Joseph.
Yes. And just not having had any district level experience was what would be the one that kept her from progressing to the top 4.
Thank you. And I'm fine if we want to do 2 days. If that's what we have to do, that's what we have to do.
Uwe, you have any thoughts?
I'm sorry.
Could we do 3 and 3? 3 interviews per
Yes.
day?
Yeah, my understanding, we can do whatever the board would like to do.
Or, and I'm fine with 3 and 3 on the 2 days. The other thought would be to do 4 and then 2 and allow more time on the second day for deliberation. Because I think we deliberate more after that. But that's just an idea.
One thing you may want to keep in mind is my understanding is that there's still a board meeting, regular scheduled board meeting on the 25th. Yeah. Don, you have anything you want to add?
No, I'm okay with the 2 days.
Okay. Then I guess the last thing to come to consensus on, are we going to do 5 and add Tasha along with the top 4? Or are we going to do 6 and add Dr. DeJoseph along with the top 4?
Am I first again?
Yes, go ahead. You're first always.
If we're going 2 days, I would recommend 6. I think this is important. This is one of our main functions as a board, and I don't want to leave any stone unturned, if you will, within reason.
So again, I recommend the top 5.
Top 5.
Top 5.
5.
I would agree, top 5.
Laurel?
I'd go with all 6.
I'm gonna say all 6.
See what happens when you're last, Rich?
If my little pea brain was right, we have 3 to 3 so far. Yeah. I would think that we should stick with the top 4 and go ahead and add the other 2 candidates from the district. And, we don't need to make a motion quite yet, right? Unless Deb has anything else to add.
The motion will be the last part of the agenda item, so whenever you guys are done discussing.
Deb, you have anything to add?
It's a tough seat that you're in. I just want to echo what was just recently said. This is an opportunity for you. This is the opportunity for you to dive deep into the candidate pool that you have. Adding again, I just want to make sure that as you're looking at for the sake of not, well, I don't know how to say it. Your decision to go with the top 6, that's your dive into your pool, and that is really why you asked to see all of the candidates and not go with just a recommended 4. I won't say just, but go with the recommended 4. So this is your time, and if it takes 2 days to go through these interviews, that is really what you're here to do. So it's doable, and if that's and we'll make that happen.
Okay, thank you. You have any other discussion, Dr. Oliver?
You might be on mute, Deb. Rich, if I could, while we're waiting for Dr. Oliver,
Sure.
I want to make sure before we wrap up tonight, like the way we started tonight, we were all thumbs for a while. And I want to make sure we're not all thumbs on the 25th. And we've got a lot of forms in front of us, interview rating forms, response summary. I'd like to get a sense of, understanding the forms. What are we using so that we're comparing apples to apples amongst us? And I don't scribble notes a different way and everybody's like, what the heck was he thinking?
Yeah.
So I just want to be organized on our end. And I'd like to make sure we accomplish that tonight.
Deb, are you there? She's calling me. Did we lose you?
Mr. Carini, can you hear us? Mr. Carini?
She's going to try to correct that. We'll continue our discussions and hopefully get back on.
Mr. Varner, I'm going to initiate the call again. Just one moment, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Joe, just along your lines there, I know we were kind of confused at first. I think once everybody had this information in front of them and they knew what information we were looking at, then I think it went a lot smoother. So if that was my fault, I apologize.
And I'm not
No, I know.
I'm
but
not
just
not
saying-
pointing fault. I'm just saying, you're exactly right. Some of us didn't have the forms in front of us.
Right.
So I want to make sure we all come in there with the correct forms.
Right, yeah.
I know Deb Oliver's not on the line right now, but hopefully when we do our interviews, just some paperwork with staples would help, because this packet was one big packet, and so I was dividing everything. So that would just help for organization.
And then some of them had the end of one and then the beginning of the other, so you couldn't put them together, which got me confused. And felt like I had to read things 3 or 4 times, which I don't have time for.
Yeah, it took a while to go through the packages, and I appreciate all the board members taking the time to go through the package. I think everybody's really well informed of the candidates. I think we have good candidates. I think the top 4 that are identified by NASB are strong candidates. And if we get Dr. Oliver back on the phone here, we can go through and make sure that everybody's on the same page with the forms like everybody suggested.
And since we've added the writing thing, we might want to add that to the rubric, the writing sample.
I was saying, this is like Apollo 13. Did we get our glitch out of the way?
Yeah, I guess while she's trying, should we take a 5-minute break or so?
So-
Okay, we'll go ahead and take it. Oh, it's not really.
It's,
Yeah, I'll go.
they'll be in the motion.
Yeah, but if we have a little bit of time here, I could go through them again. The first candidate I have in front of me here is Miranda Kogan. It's Kogon. And it's Dr. Kogan. Next is John Goldhart, Goldhardt. Also, Dr. Goldhart. Then Vernice Gutierrez. That's Verenice Gutierrez. And she's also a PhD. Then we have Andrew Fueling, also known as AJ Fueling to most everybody. And those are the top 4 that were identified by NASB.
This does bring up, though, do we have a backup plan? Because all 4 of them are on Zoom when we do the actual interviews.
You mean if we lose the Zoom?
Yeah, do we have? I mean, it's something to think about because obviously it can happen. So maybe we can look into, I don't know if we have phone numbers we can call them on or, I don't know how you do it, but
Yeah.
I think we need a backup.
I think that'd probably be what we'd do, right?
I mean, are there high winds forecast for next Monday and Tuesday? Because I was on a Zoom at my house and I rarely lose power and the power went out 3 times during a meeting.
Yeah, we all know with electronics, there's a lot of things can happen in technology. But in your packet, as long as we're waiting, I believe if you have a packet, the superintendent interview scoring rubric, everybody should have that. I believe that's what they're recommending we use when we
Welcome
interview.
to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
Yes.
We are still on the record. Do you intend to take a recess?
Enter your participant ID followed by pound. Otherwise, just press pound to continue. Please enter the meeting password followed by pound.
We'll see if she gets.
You are in the meeting now. There are 2 participants in the meeting. You are muted. You can mute or unmute yourself. You are unmuted.
Dr. Oliver, are you back with us? All right, let's take a 5-minute
back.
recess.
I am back.
We're back.
All right, we were going to take a recess, but we'll cancel that and move on. Dr. Oliver, I think the question from the board is to make sure that we're all on the same page when it comes to the process for the interview of what materials we're supposed to use for helping score the candidate interview.
Yes, we will get, and I was fortunately able to listen from the live feed. So I did get to hear most of what you were talking about. We will write, let me just go through a little piece. We will have something there for the sample writing rubric that you're going to be receiving, or the sample of the writing into the rubric, and where you might see how that fits into that rubric. And also with the packet, the board packet that came in was Renee. I'll work with Renee to make sure that they're all individualized. There was a Google folder that was sent where everything was individualized. I will make sure that you all have the exact same information that is for the public, that you will also have access to that through a folder so that you are able to go in and make your notes if you want digitally for any of the information, as well as have it in hard copy. As far as Zoom, my understanding, and Mr. Stokes or Renee, you would be able to say this probably more clearly, but my understanding is this room does not, do the streaming as well as the theater room that you're going to be in with the Zoom, and there was something else going on tonight or something of that nature. We will have a backup plan that their phone numbers will be ready for you should anything occur for that, for you to be able to get to them, if anything happens with the Zoom. I will be scheduling their times. I'll be calling them all this evening and letting them know of the top, should this pass, I should say, I don't want to jump the gun, and letting them know of their moving forward and scheduling those times within the next day and a half with them once I've met with Renee to get the times that we have in the building around the board meeting that you have. Does that answer the questions I think that I heard?
Any questions for Deb? Does that clarify the question?
Most of it, yeah. Just sorry to ask the same question again if I misunderstood, but in front of us now we have, starting from page 14, interview response summary, interview rating form, those kinds of things. Are we going to keep and use these, or are you going to give us new kind of customized per applicant for next week? I just want to be clear what we'll have.
Yes, thank you. You will have one packet per applicant of everything you need with their name and everything on it, so that you will have 6 separate packets of information for each one for each of the candidates.
Okay, thank you.
Deb, could I just request for this? I think we want to request single-sided pages. It was a little bit confusing finding things with this much information, so simpler would be easier, I think, in my opinion.
Yes, and I'll work with Renee to make sure that we get that. Get that for you. Yes.
And then in those packets, will you have the questions that each one of the trustees is going to be asking?
Yes, we will. So you can expect to have a packet that has your name on it, the questions you're asking. You will have a bank of all of the questions that are being asked, but particularly those that you are asking in the order you will be asking them. So you'll have, let's say, if we do come up with 12 questions as an example, and you're asking question number 2 and number 6, those would be bolded for you so that you know those are your questions, but you're able to have all the questions to follow along.
Dr. Oliver and Don, you can chime in on this, but my understanding by talking to Trustee Carini is that he may not be able to be here on those 2 dates. Is that still correct, Don?
I will do my best. I do have a conflict that I can't get out of. It's a health thing on the 26th.
So, Deb, in your opinion, how should we handle that if we have one trustee that has questions to ask, but on a certain date, like Mr. Creaney said that he may not be able to be here on the 26th? What's the best way to handle that?
We'll have the board president, that would be you, will be asking the questions of those that are not present.
Okay, that'll work.
Do we need to, well, I'm sure we do need to discuss times. 25th, what time is the first interview?
Well, if we're going to do, yeah, I'd say we go ahead and, go ahead, Deb, if you want to input.
I was going to say, I believe that Renee and I were talking about that, and when the room was available, and just really depending on what time you are going to begin your board meeting, we'd want to have those interviews done prior to the start of the board meeting.
My thought would be to start earlier, like at 8 o'clock, and then wrap up maybe at 3. That way it gives it some of a break before we come back for the regular board meeting. That's just my thoughts.
And I might recommend, it doesn't matter to me, but I'm thinking for the applicants, if somebody's chiming in from, I think it's New Hampshire, maybe they're not the late meeting. We schedule them early, so they're not doing this at 6, 7 o'clock at night, their time.
Yeah.
And Deb, hopefully you can work with them too, because I know the first, it looked like from your packet, the first and our other schedule, the first dates were the 26th and 27th and 28th, and then the 25th got added. So just please work with the applicants and the finalists on their availability because we added the 25th later.
Yes, they are aware, and we will make sure they are aware of their date and time, and we'll be very conscientious of anybody on the East Coast not being late at night.
Okay, then that'll all be included in the package, the start time and everything else we discussed will be all in the packages for the board members. And when do we anticipate being able to get that out to the board members?
That information is within the next day and a half as I contact and work with Renee on the timing for the room. But we can anticipate an 8 a.m. start time.
Right.
I would assume. I do believe the rooms are scheduled for the full day.
They are. So we'll do 3 on the 25th and 3 on the 26th then.
Yes.
All right.
Somebody on the board brought up whether we do 3 and 3 or 4 and 2. I don't care either way, but I just wanted to make sure we were comfortable either way for whoever brought that up. That, having 2 the last day gives you more time to sum things up, but
Yeah.
it
And
also
if-
makes the
it-
day
and if-
longer on Monday.
Dawn's not available on the 26th. Maybe having 4 the first day helps. So I'm fine with 3 and 3 or 4 and 2, whatever works.
And if you will leave that, if we can leave that open, that way I can work with the candidates and make sure that that they're available for a time. And it also gives us time to work around making sure that we leave ample time for your preparation for your board meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion from the board? I think we're to the point then for a motion, and I think Mr. Ryan has kind of taken some notes and is going to give us a sample motion or wording for the motion.
So in your packets, you had suggested motions, and I just doctored this up a little bit based on the conversation. If when I read this, any of the trustees feels it's accurate, you can just say so moved. Motion that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve the following applicants for superintendent of the Carson City School District to be interviewed on January 25th and 22nd, 2022, between the
26th.
hours, I'm sorry, what?
The 26th?
January 25th and 26th, 2022, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. on those days via Zoom with a physical location for the board members in the Bob Boldrick Theater of the Carson City Community Center, with each applicant given up to 90 minutes for the interview. This motion includes approval of the bank of questions discussed by the board, consistent with the consensus discussion of the board, to be used during the interviews, with direction to NASB to narrow the questions down to 12 to be randomly assigned by NASB to the trustees to be asked during the interviews, and to further direct NASB to request writing samples from each of the applicants.
Do you need to add the final applicants to that motion too?
That's important. The final applicants include Miranda Kogan, John Goldhart, Vernicia Gutierrez, Andrew Fueling, Dr. Jennifer Ward DeJoseph, Tasha Fuson, and that's it.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Do we have any public comment since this is an action item? Pepsi?
I know this was a difficult situation, and I thank the Board of Trustees to having the patience and going through the process. I like the questions that Mr. Joe Casiopo said, and particularly, I was a little concerned that given that the community has provided you feedback over the last 6 or 7 months on equity-based learning, CRT, et cetera, that Mr. Casiopo's question, number 7, did not make the bank of questions. That is very important to all of us who've attended these meetings, and we'd like to know what the candidates feel about that. Number 8 question that Mr. Casiopo did, what is your experience and opinion regarding the student-centered education model, was also, I thought, very, very critical since the funding model is changing. And I would like to know if the candidates are aware of it and how they would incorporate that in student success. So if I had a vote, which I don't, I would like to recommend number 7 and number 8 from Mr. Casiopo's questions to be included. Second thing is, my open question is there going to be any community input after you go through your process? Third question is, or a comment, is that we are ranked number 40th or 50th in the state. And I think it's important for the new superintendent, who may be with us for as long as Richard Stokes has been with us, that we have a change agent. Simply status quo is not going to do it for us. So I think in your questions, please incorporate their experience in bringing positive change and improving. I think there was a question on improving student learning, but change agent is just as critical. I assume that the community will be present at the theater, so that's good news. And last but not least is just something to consider. This board, we're going to have a new board in January, and the hiring process was accelerated this year to take advantage of the pool of candidates, to be ahead of other districts who may be looking for superintendents. So my question to you, whoever the final candidate is, will there be any opportunity for the new board to ratify the choice? And those are my questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Betsy. Any other public comment? Richard?
It's okay. Thank you, Karen. I just wanted to say that I'm kind of disappointed, but I really appreciated the fact that Joe Casiopa brought up the metrics in one of the questions here that was adopted. Because again, if we don't have any continuous quality improvement in the school system that's documented, how do we get from point A to point B? We don't have a roadmap for success. And we really need to have this next superintendent, the CFO of the schools, to have a roadmap for success. How are we going to, we're abysmal so far as our ratings go. Maybe we're 20th in the nation. That's one of the things I've heard. The state is 50th in the nation. Where is the roadmap to success that you're going to bring to us so that we can get to number 1? Okay? When 20 years ago, we were number 4 in the nation. What happens in between then and now that brought us down to where we are? And again, we need to start working on successful things and people who have a track record of success. And because we can't deal with the status quo anymore. 20th is unacceptable. 50th is horrendous. Our students, our children deserve better than that. And we should really do some soul searching on how to find a criteria-based system that will allow that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. I think, Karen, I saw you coming up.
Hello, good evening. Karen Stevens for the record. I wanted to ditto what Betsy said, because I think we do need a change agent. We need to improve where we're at. When I moved here 26 years ago and put my children in the school system, it was a great school system, and it's gone dramatically downhill. It's just very disappointing. As far as the questions that Joe listed out, I was also very disappointed that nobody except for the president chose number 7, because I think that's very important too, that we know where this individual stands, because we have had some misunderstandings by certain people that felt that they were able to choose topics without having the board's decision on that. And then also number 10 of Joe's questions, I thought that it's excellent to add what are our strengths, but shouldn't we know what he thinks or she thinks the weaknesses are as well? Just, sugarcoating it isn't what we want to hear. We want to hear both sides of it. So those are my thoughts on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Any other public comment in the audience? Seeing none, we'll close public comment in the audience, but we'll go in. Is there any online comments?
Let me refresh, Mr. Varner. I have this comment regarding this item, and then I have another public comment just for general public comment. This comment is from Robert Harris. He would like to thank and apologize to the applicants who are not currently district employees. I hope you all gained some experience in the process, but the dirty secret that you may not be aware of is this district already has its pick for the new superintendent. Carson is a town with a good old boy network and nepotism when they can get away with it. Between the hefty $200,000 plus salary that was recommended and the agenda that the superintendent's secret staff has set in motion, I am left wondering why the union boss that comes to every school board meeting didn't apply for the position. Anytime the echo chamber is challenged, you see less and less transparency from not only the superintendent but the trustees as well. For the last 5 years, Carson schools, the entire district, and the state have been level 2 or partial understanding according to the assessment every parent gets from the Nevada Department of Education. I was surprised to see a trustee attend the Carson City Democrats weekly meeting and not only advocate for folks to run for school board, which is supposed to be a nonpartisan position, but also categorized Carson schools as being ranked pretty well. I am not satisfied with partial understanding as doing pretty well. Those who have been on the board for more than 5 years have failed up during that time. We owe our children more than they are currently getting from their schools, and it starts with the superintendent and every member of the board on down. After contacting the chairman of the Carson City Republicans, I was told the same board member was asked to speak and did not respond to the email. This is implicit bias, and before an investigation is considered, as this board member should resign immediately. This is for all board members and current superintendent. Please let this message serve as a request to preserve your documents. Any destruction of emails or hard copies of evidence could be considered unlawful under FOIA law after a formal request for preservation is given. The goal of this potential investigation will be to decipher how biased the superintendent selection truly is. That's all I have, Mr. Varner.
Thank you. I probably got out of a little order here, but is there any board discussion on the motion before we take a vote?
I'll just make a comment that, again, I put these questions all up there, and I'm fine with the questions that were selected, but if there's an appetite to add more to the pool, I'm good either way. I know it's a tough choice and it's a balance, so.
Any other discussion? Ryan, maybe I can ask you, is if we wanted to add another question, since it's not in the motion, could we do that or not?
Yeah, it would just be amending the motion to include the additional question. And the party moving would have to accept the amendment, and the party seconding would have to accept it as well.
Is there any appetite to amend the motion, to add another question?
If it's going into a pool of questions, I don't have a problem amending the motion to include, was it Joe's question number 7?
I would concur with that too.
I think if I make the amendment, the person who seconded me also has to second the amendment.
So I'll second it.
All right, seeing no more board discussion, we'll go ahead and take a vote. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Let me look at the agenda, see if we have anything else here. We'll go ahead and move on to public comment at this time. Comments will be accepted in person or through virtual participation via email. Comments may be made by members of the public on any matter within the authority of this board. Please note that public comment will be taken on items marked for possible action before any action is taken on such items, and members of the public are encouraged to comment on such items at the time they are being considered. Although members of the board may respond to questions and discuss issues raised during public comment, no action may be taken on such matter until the matter is placed on an agenda for action at a meeting. In making public comment, speakers are asked to come to the table or podium, sign in, speak into the microphone, and identify themselves for the record. Speakers are instructed to limit their comments to no more than 3 minutes, regardless of whether the comments are made in person or through virtual participation, and to simply not repeat comments made by others. Do we have any public comment at this time? Betsy?
Don't have to repeat my name. I wanted the board to take notice of the article that Jessica wrote on the school closure last week. And I hope all of you have read it, and I can certainly send you copies of it after the meeting. And there was a discussion on the reopening plan and how we are doing with the abundance of caution was the word that was used to close the school. And I looked through this and I conferred with Jessica just to make sure I understood it. 10 student case investigations were completed during the time frame of December 19th to January 1. Of these cases, 40% attended school while infectious. 3 school faculty members tested positive for COVID-19, and 67 attended while infectious. I'd just like to point out that these are extremely small samples. And when I talked to the lady who does the investigation, she told me that she gets a list of the infected positive people, and then she calls them. And not all of them return her calls. And so if the sample size was 10, the return calls may have been 5. And then the 5 becomes how many attended school after being infectious. So the sample size is really, really small. That's the bottom line. And to extend that small sample size to make decisions that this board, that counterbalances the board's decision in July to make mask optional, I think is totally non-data driven decision and needs to be reversed and should be on the agenda as soon as possible so it can be addressed as quickly as possible. Again, the sample size are very small and the methodology has a lot of assumptions which is not consistent from one week to another. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. Any other public comment at this time? Seeing none, we'll close in-person public comment. Do we have any online public comment?
Yes, Mr. Varner. This comment is from Lexi Harris. Students at Carson High School either have the option to go to school in person 5 days a week or do completely online school if they do not want to wear a mask. Have we seriously let a piece of fabric come between children and their schooling? As a sophomore at Carson High, I ask that my school stays open and that I can once again choose whether I wear a mask or not. Please keep my school open. I need it, my classmates need it, my teachers need it. I find it appalling when I notice myself feeling sickly anxious over going to certain classes because of the pressure on me to wear a mask properly. If cloth masks were effective, students from my school would not need to be excluded and forced to participate in virtual school simply for being exposed. The risk of their possible exposure would not mean anything if the mask worked. Yet I see friends frustrated and absent from class when they are not even sick in the first place. There is little evidence I have seen supporting a hard mandate on children to wear a mask. From a document compiling varying mask studies from Cato Institute, quote, one study of cloth mask simulated leakage and found that a hole equal to less than 1% of the mask area decreased mask efficiency by over 60%, end quote. The fragility of a mask combined with school-age children is not a blend that aids in the so-called safety that is supposed to be brought about by the mask. From the mentioned document, a test of almost 8,000 people collected data on the downsides of mask wearing, which, quote, not only failed to show a statistically significant benefit for mask wearing, but the per protocol analysis showed higher point estimates for mask wearers compared to non-mask wearers for both clinical respiratory infections and laboratory confirmed respiratory infections, end quote. I do not feel protected by my school board, by the adults in charge whose job is to protect me. I've watched Carson High turn into a violent place, and I fear I will never get to see it in a normal environment before I graduate. That's all I have, Mr. Varner.
Thank you. Seeing no more online comment, we'll close that comment. And at this time, we're at the point where we're going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you guys for attending and your input. And thank you, board members.